The HOA neighborhood looked perfect from far away, the kind of place people bragged about online: clean streets, trimmed grass, white fences, and a park that looked like it came out of a brochure. But anyone who stayed long enough could feel how cold it really was, how quiet it felt in a way that was not peaceful but empty, like something human had been pushed out little by little. Cameras blinked from black poles at every corner, small red lights watching every move. Signs stood everywhere, neat and sharp, warning about fines for noise, fines for sitting too long, fines for eating, fines for looking out of place. Even the benches were placed perfectly, measured and aligned as if comfort mattered less than control. Every morning, right after sunrise, an old man named Mr. Hale walked slowly into the park and sat on the same bench near the edge where the trees cast a thin shadow. He wore the same brown coat every day, old and worn, with frayed sleeves and a missing button. His shoes were clean but tired, like they had walked too many miles without rest. His head stayed low most of the time, eyes fixed on the ground, hands shaking slightly as if they remembered warmer days. People passed him without looking. Some crossed the path to avoid him. Some stared just long enough to judge and then looked away. No one spoke to him. No one asked his name. To the HOA, he was not a person. He was a problem waiting to be reported. Every few days, thin white papers appeared on the bench beside him, placed there quietly by security or HOA staff, never handed directly, never explained face to face. The words were always the same, printed in cold black ink: loitering in common area, improper use of HOA facilities, appearance concerns reported by residents. Each notice came with a fine amount and a warning. Mr. Hale folded the papers carefully and placed them inside his coat pocket as if they were important letters, even though each one felt like another door closing. He had once lived inside this same HOA, in a small unit near the park, back when his wife was still alive and his hands were strong enough to fix broken fences, leaking pipes, and loose doors for neighbors who thanked him with smiles and warm coffee. But time had not been kind. An injury took his job. Medical bills took his savings. Fines took what little he had left. His wife passed quietly one winter night, and after that, the home was gone too. The HOA said rules were rules. Appeals were denied. And now the park was the only place where he could sit without being told to move, at least for a few hours each morning. On one calm afternoon, when the sun hung low and the park felt even quieter than usual, a little girl named Emma was walking with her babysitter along the path. Emma was small, with bright eyes and a simple dress that swayed as she moved. She asked questions about everything: the trees, the birds, the clouds, and the babysitter answered with half smiles, distracted by her phone. When Emma saw Mr. Hale sitting alone on the bench, something made her slow down. She stared at him longer than anyone else ever did. She did not see a problem. She did not see a rule being broken. She saw a man sitting by himself, shoulders heavy, like he was holding a lifetime of sadness. Without asking, without fear, she slipped her hand from the babysitter's grasp and walked toward him. The babysitter looked up too late. Her heart jumped as she noticed the cameras, the signs, the rules, and the old man who did not belong. From across the park, an HOA board member stood near the walking trail, dressed sharp, phone already in hand. He had noticed Mr. Hale long before Emma did. He always noticed. Today, when he saw the little girl approaching the bench, his jaw tightened. This could become a liability. He raised his phone slightly, ready to call security, ready to stop whatever was about to happen. The air around the bench felt tense, thick, like the moment before a storm. Birds stopped chirping. Footsteps slowed. Emma stopped right in front of Mr. Hale and looked up at him. He felt her presence before he saw her. He lifted his eyes slowly, expecting anger or orders, but instead he met a child's curious gaze. Emma smiled softly, not loud, not playful, but kind in a way that surprised him. Her voice was small and gentle as she spoke. The words she said were simple, the kind of words adults often forget to say, but they hit him harder than any fine notice ever had. The park seemed to freeze. The old man's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for months. His lips trembled as he tried to answer, but no sound came out. The cameras kept blinking, recording everything. The HOA board member took a step closer, his expression tight, unsure whether to interrupt or wait. People walking nearby slowed down, sensing something important was happening, something that did not fit the rules. Mr. Hale's hands shook more now as he tried to steady himself. No one had spoken to him like that in a long time. No one had spoken to him like he mattered. Emma stood there patiently, waiting, not understanding why the old man could not answer right away. She did not know about fines or rules or reports. She only knew that people should not sit alone looking sad. The babysitter rushed forward, apologizing loudly, reaching for Emma's arm, but Emma gently pulled back, eyes never leaving Mr. Hale. The HOA board member cleared his throat, preparing to step in, to remind everyone about safety and rules, but something in the air made him hesitate. Mr. Hale finally found his voice, rough and weak, like it had not been used in a long time. He tried to smile, but it broke halfway through. His eyes stayed locked on the little girl as if she were the only real thing in the park. For a moment, the perfect HOA image cracked. The clean paths, the silent benches, the blinking cameras all felt smaller than the quiet moment between a child and a broken old man. People around them stopped pretending not to see. A woman paused her walk. A man lowered his phone. Someone whispered, "That's the man who used to fix bikes." Another whispered, "He helped my dad once." The board member felt a strange unease, like control was slipping, just a little. He took another step forward, voice ready, but still nothing came out. Emma tilted her head slightly, waiting for an answer, not realizing that her simple words had already changed something deep inside the man sitting before her. The tension held, stretched thin, as if one wrong move would shatter the moment. Mr. Hale swallowed hard, blinking back tears, trying to speak again. His chest rose and fell as he gathered himself. The park was no longer just a park. It had become a quiet stage where rules faced humanity, where a system built to look perfect was being tested by a single act of kindness. And as the HOA stepped closer, ready to intervene, ready to protect the rules, the old man struggled to answer a child who saw him when no one else did, not knowing that this small moment was only the beginning of something much bigger, something the cameras could record but never fully understand. The moment did not break quickly, it stretched, heavy and quiet, like the park itself was holding its breath. Mr. Hale finally lowered his eyes because the tears would not stop anymore, they slid down. His face without shame, because shame had already taken everything else from him, and Emma noticed, her small smile fading into concern as she stepped a little closer, not touching him yet, just close enough so he would not feel alone. The HOA board member cleared his throat again, louder this time, reminding himself of rules and responsibilities, but before he could speak, the babysitter reached them, voice shaking with panic, apologizing again and again, saying the child did not know better, that she would take her away right now, that there would be no trouble. But Emma shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving the old man, and in that soft stubborn way only children have, she said she wanted to stay just a little longer, just until he was okay, and those words hit Mr. Hale even harder than before because no one had asked if he was okay in a very long time, not when he lost his job, not when the hospital bills came, not when his wife's side of the bed stayed empty, not when the HOA letter said final notice in bold red letters, and not when he sat on that bench day after day pretending the cold did not bother him. The board member finally spoke, his voice polite but sharp, saying the child needed to step away, saying this was not appropriate, saying safety rules existed for a reason, but his words sounded hollow in the open air, and people nearby began to slow down, pretending to stretch or check their phones while listening closely, because something about this felt different, felt real. Mr. Hale raised his hand slightly, not to stop Emma, but to protect her, to show he would leave if needed. His voice cracked as he said it was fine, that he was used to moving on, that she did not need to get into trouble because of him. But Emma frowned, confused, and asked why he always had to move, why he could not just sit like everyone else, and no one had an answer ready for that, not the babysitter, not the board member, not the people watching from a distance. Mr. Hale took a slow breath and tried to explain in simple words, because children deserve simple truth. He told her that sometimes grown-ups make rules that forget about people, that sometimes when you do not have much, rules feel heavier. Emma listened carefully, her small hands folding together, and then she asked him something again, quietly, something so gentle and honest that his shoulders shook as he tried to hold himself together, because she was not asking for money or favors or help. She was asking for connection, for permission to care, and that was something the HOA could not fine or control. The babysitter looked helplessly at the board member, who now felt eyes on him, real eyes, judging eyes, and for the first time since joining the HOA, he felt unsure if enforcing rules right now would make him look right or cruel. More people stopped walking, the park slowly filled with stillness instead of motion. A woman with a stroller whispered that she remembered Mr. Hale fixing her fence for 3 years ago. A man nodded and said he once helped jump his car late at night. These small memories floated through the air, fragile but powerful, and Mr. Hale heard them, his head lifting slightly, disbelief crossing his face, because he thought everyone had forgotten. He thought kindness disappeared once it was no longer useful. Emma looked proud, like she had uncovered a secret treasure, and she stepped closer again, this time placing her small hand gently on his worn sleeve, and he did not pull away. The board member's phone buzzed in his hand with a new message, probably another complaint, another reminder to act, but he did not look at it right away. His eyes stayed on the old man and the child, and he felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest, something like guilt. The babysitter finally lowered her voice, telling Emma they really might have to go, but Emma asked one last thing, asking if she could come back tomorrow to see him again. And Mr. Hale's breath caught, because hope is dangerous when you have nothing. Hope hurts more than silence. He hesitated, glancing at the board member, expecting a firm no, but what he saw instead was hesitation, real hesitation, and that was new. The board member said nothing for a long moment, then quietly said the child should return to her guardian for now, his tone softer than before, not threatening, not final. Emma squeezed Mr. Hale's sleeve once more before stepping back, telling him she would see him soon, because she wanted to hear more of his stories, and with that, she turned and walked away, the babysitter following closely, heart still racing. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispering to each other, carrying the moment with them like something fragile, something important, and Mr. Hale sat alone again on the bench, but this time the loneliness felt different, heavier and lighter at the same time, because for the first time in a long while, someone had seen him, really seen him. And as the cameras kept blinking and the HOA board member walked away without issuing a single notice, Mr. Hale stared at the path where Emma had disappeared, his hands still shaking, his chest tight with emotion, knowing deep down that whatever had just started in that quiet park was far from over, and that the rules of this neighborhood were about to be tested in ways no one expected. The next morning came slower than usual for Mr. Hale. Sleep had barely touched him. His mind kept returning to the small voice, the soft eyes, the way Emma had looked at him like he was not broken or unwanted, but simply human. When the sun finally rose, he stood outside the shelter for a long moment, debating whether to go back to the park or disappear somewhere else before hope hurt him again, but his feet carried him there on their own, slow and careful, as if afraid the bench might reject him this time. The park looked the same, clean and perfect, signs still standing tall, cameras still blinking without feeling. But something inside him had shifted, something fragile but alive. He sat down on the same bench, folding his hands together to stop the shaking, telling himself he would leave early today, just in case. Minutes passed, then more. People walked by, some glanced at him longer than before, not with anger, but with curiosity, recognition, and that made his chest tighten, because being seen again felt strange and dangerous. Then he heard footsteps that were lighter, faster, filled with purpose, and before he could lift his head, Emma stood in front of him again, her smile wide and proud, like she had kept a promise. Her babysitter followed closely. Nervous but quieter than before, Emma did not wait. She climbed onto the bench beside him and sat down as if she belonged there, as if the bench had always been theirs. Mr. Hale's breath caught. He tried to tell her she should not be there, that rules might cause trouble, but she shook her head and told him she asked her mom, and her mom said kindness was not against the rules, and those words hit him like warmth after a long winter. From across the park, the HOA board member noticed immediately, his shoulders stiffening, his phone already in his hand, but this time he did not move right away, because people were watching now, not hiding it, and that changed everything. Emma swung her legs gently and asked Mr. Hale about his life, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that invited him to speak, and slowly, carefully, he did. He told her about the house he once lived in near the park, about planting flowers with his wife, about fixing swings so kids would not get hurt, about nights when neighbors knocked on his door for help and thanked him with smiles. His voice broke when he spoke about his wife, how she used to sit on this very bench and tease him for feeding birds too much. Emma listened closely, her small face serious, absorbing every word like it mattered, because to her, it did. As he spoke, memories drew people closer without them realizing it. A woman stopped near the path, tears in her eyes, recognizing the man who once fixed her porch steps. A teenager whispered to his friend that his dad always talked about Mr. Hale, the man who helped everyone. The park filled again, not with noise, but with presence, and the HOA board member felt pressure building like a wall behind him. Emma suddenly asked why Mr. Hale did not go home at night, and silence fell heavy. The babysitter tensed, ready to step in, but Mr. Hale answered honestly, saying he no longer had a home, saying rules and money took it away, saying he tried to fight but lost. Emma frowned deeply, her small hands clenching, and she said something that cut deeper than anger ever could. She said that homes were not walls, they were people, and that if people were pushed out, the home was already broken. The board member stepped forward then, unable to stay silent anymore, his voice measured but tight, saying the child needed to step away again, that this was becoming an issue, but this time his words were met with sound, real sound, murmurs, whispers, someone saying let them talk, someone else saying this man helped us, and suddenly the board member was no longer standing on solid ground. Emma stood up on the bench, small but fearless, and asked him why rules only showed up when someone was hurting, and not when someone needed help, and the board member froze, because there was no training for that question, no policy for explaining cruelty to a child. Mr. Hale tried to calm her, telling her it was okay, that he did not want trouble, that he was used to being invisible, but Emma shook her head and said no one should be invisible, not in a place that called itself a community. The word community echoed strangely in the park, like it had been forgotten and was now remembered again. A man pulled out his phone and started recording openly this time, not hiding, not ashamed. The babysitter whispered that Emma's mother was on her way, because the calls had already started. The board member felt sweat gather at his collar, because he could feel control slipping, not loudly, not violently, but slowly, the most dangerous way. Emma sat back down beside Mr. Hale and leaned gently against his arm, and he felt something inside him crack open. Years of holding it together with silence gave way, and tears fell freely now, not loud, not dramatic, just honest. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, afraid to move, afraid this moment might disappear if he did. He told her he was tired, not just in his body, but in his heart. Tired of proving he deserved space to sit, tired of being a problem. Emma looked up at him and asked if he would promise not to leave, just for today, and he nodded slowly, because for the first time in a long time, staying felt possible. As Emma's mother arrived at the edge of the park, seeing the crowd, the cameras, the board member standing stiff, and her daughter sitting beside a broken old man, she felt fear and pride collide in her chest, and Mr. Hale felt it too, the sense that this moment was growing beyond him, beyond a bench, beyond a park. Something bigger was forming, something the rules could not easily erase, and as the cameras blinked and phones recorded, Mr. Hale realized with a quiet ache that whatever happened next would change everything, because once a child names an injustice out loud, it can never fully hide again. That Emma's mother stepped closer, her heart beating fast as she took in the scene, the old man sitting stiff with tears on his face, her daughter leaning against him without fear, the HOA board member standing nearby with his forced calm, and a quiet crowd forming like the park itself had decided to watch. She knelt beside Emma first, checking her gently, asking if she was okay, and Emma nodded quickly, pointing at Mr. Hale and saying he was sad and needed company, and those simple words made Emma's mother pause, because she could see the truth in them. Mr. Hale tried to stand out of respect, apologizing right away, saying he never meant to cause trouble, saying he would leave if needed, but his knees trembled and Emma's mother reached out without thinking, placing a steady hand on his arm, telling him to please sit, telling him he did nothing wrong, and that small kindness made his chest tighten again. The HOA board member cleared his throat and stepped forward, switching into a formal tone, explaining rules, liability, safety concerns, and proper use of common space, the same words he had used 100 times before, but this time they sounded empty, because Emma's mother listened quietly and then asked one simple question, asking why those rules never came with care, why no one had asked why this man had nowhere else to go. And the board member stumbled, trying to respond, but the answer would not form, because the truth was uncomfortable, and discomfort had never been part of the HOA handbook. People began to speak now, slowly at first, then with more confidence, a woman saying Mr. Hale fixed her gate years ago, a man saying he shoveled snow for free when his wife was sick, another saying he taught kids how to fish near the creek, each memory stacked on the last, building a picture of a man the HOA paperwork had erased. Mr. Hale listened in shock, his hands shaking harder, because he thought those moments were forgotten, and hearing them again felt like being pulled back from the edge of something dark. Emma's mother looked at the board member and calmly asked for every fine ever issued to Mr. Hale, asking to see the paper trail that broke him, and the board member said that information was private, his voice tightening. But the crowd did not like that answer. Phones rose higher, recording everything now without shame. Emma tugged gently at her mother's sleeve and whispered the same request she had whispered before, the one that had frozen the park the first day, and Emma's mother's eyes filled as she heard it clearly this time, because it was not childish or careless, it was kind and brave, and she nodded slowly, standing up and facing the board member again, saying that her daughter's request deserved an answer, saying that this neighborhood called itself a community but forgot what the word meant. The board member felt heat rise in his face, because he could feel the balance shifting, not against him personally, but against the system he represented, and systems do not like to be questioned. Security arrived at the edge of the park, unsure whether to step in or stay back, because the situation did not look dangerous, it looked human, and that confused them. Mr. Hale finally spoke again, his voice low and tired, asking everyone to please stop, saying he did not want trouble, saying he would leave and not come back if that made things easier, and hearing that broke something in Emma's mother. Because no one should have to disappear to keep peace, she told him softly that he was not the problem, and that sometimes peace only comes when people stop being quiet about wrong things. The board member checked his phone again, messages piling up now, calls from other members, complaints mixed with confusion, because the video had already begun to spread beyond the park, beyond the HOA gates, and he knew this could not be handled quietly anymore. Emma sat back down beside Mr. Hale and held his hand tightly, not letting go, and he looked at her like she was holding him to the world, keeping him from falling away. Emma's mother stood beside them, steady and calm, no longer afraid of fines or warnings, because some moments are worth more than comfort. As the sun moved slowly across the sky, the park no longer felt cold, it felt alive with tension and truth, and Mr. Hale realized that the simple request Emma made was growing into something bigger than all of them, something that would force the HOA to look at itself, something that would not be erased by a notice left quietly on a bench, and as the cameras blinked and the crowd stayed, refusing to look away, it became clear that this was no longer just about one old man or one little girl, it was about what kind of place this neighborhood truly was, and whether it would choose rules over people, or finally remember how to be human. That evening, the park finally emptied, but the moment did not leave with the people. It followed them home, sat heavy in their chests, and spread quietly through phones and conversations, because videos had already been shared, clips of a little girl holding an old man's hand, clips of neighbors speaking up, clips of an HOA board member standing silent with no answer ready, and by nightfall, the story was no longer just inside the gates of the HOA. It was everywhere, in group chats, on local pages, in messages sent with shaking hands and angry hearts, and Mr. Hale did not know any of this yet, because he sat on a narrow bed at the shelter, staring at the wall, replaying Emma's voice in his mind, afraid to believe that today was real, afraid that tomorrow the bench would be gone, or worse, that hope would hurt more than the cold ever did. Emma, on the other hand, could not sleep at all. She kept asking her mother if Mr. Hale was okay, if he had dinner, if he was warm, and her mother answered softly, holding her close, telling her she did the right thing, even though inside she was scared, scared of fines, scared of angry emails, scared of being targeted by the HOA. But every time fear tried to win, she remembered the way Mr. Hale looked when someone finally chose him, and that gave her strength, because some choices change you. And once you make them, you cannot go back to silence. By morning, the HOA office phones would not stop ringing. Board members argued behind closed doors, some saying they needed to act fast and shut this down, others saying it was already too late, because reporters had called, asking about a homeless man fined for sitting in a public park, asking about a child who asked a question no adult could answer, and the board member from the park sat quietly in the meeting room, his face pale, because he could not forget the look in Emma's eyes when she asked why rules only showed up when people were hurting, and no policy could protect him from that memory. At the shelter, Mr. Hale was told someone wanted to see him, and his heart dropped, expecting trouble, expecting security or another warning. But instead it was Emma's mother, standing there with nervous hands and honest eyes. She told him the truth gently, that people were talking, that neighbors remembered him, that things were moving fast, and Mr. Hale listened in disbelief, shaking his head, saying he never wanted attention, never wanted to cause problems, and she told him that sometimes problems already exist, they are just hidden until someone small and brave points at them, and for the first time in years, Mr. Hale laughed quietly, not because things were funny, but because they felt unreal. Emma ran forward and hugged him without asking, wrapping her arms around him like he belonged, and he froze for a second before hugging back carefully, afraid to break the moment, afraid to break himself. She told him she saved a seat for him on the bench, that he had to come back, because she promised, and hearing that promise made his chest ache, because promises were dangerous, but he nodded anyway, because some promises are worth the risk. That afternoon, they returned to the park together, and this time, people were already waiting, not to complain, not to judge, but to stand. Neighbors brought water, someone brought food, someone brought a blanket, and Mr. Hale felt overwhelmed, unsure where to look, unsure how to accept kindness again, because being invisible teaches you to survive without it. The cameras still blinked, but now they captured something different, not a violation, but a gathering, not a problem, but a truth, and the HOA board member arrived too, slower than before, less certain, watching as the community he thought he controlled began to act without permission. Emma climbed onto the bench again, smiling proudly, and asked Mr. Hale if he was ready to answer her request now, and he swallowed hard, because her request was simple but heavy. She had asked him not to disappear, to stay, to let people care, and standing there with the crowd around him, Mr. Hale finally spoke louder than he ever had, telling her he would try, telling her he was tired of running, and the people around them clapped softly, some wiping tears, because they understood how hard that promise was. But not everyone was happy. Emails began to arrive, complaints about gatherings, about safety, about setting bad examples, and the HOA board split deeper, because control was slipping and compassion was growing, and those two things rarely survive together. Mr. Hale felt the tension. He knew this fight was not over, that kindness always comes with a cost, but as Emma sat beside him, swinging her legs and smiling up at him like the world was still good, he decided that even if tomorrow brought trouble, today was worth it, because once someone reminds you that you matter, you cannot unlearn it. And as the sun lowered over the park and the neighborhood watched itself change, it became clear that the hardest part was still ahead, because the HOA would soon have to choose between protecting its image or finally protecting its people. The days that followed felt heavier than any fine notice Mr. Hale had ever received, because now there was hope mixed with fear, and that combination kept him awake at night. The HOA announced an emergency meeting, closed door at first, then opened after pressure grew, and word spread fast through the neighborhood. Neighbors who never attended meetings before marked their calendars, because this was no longer about rules on paper, it was about what kind of people they were choosing to be. Mr. Hale did not want to go. He said it more than once, telling Emma's mother that he did not belong in rooms full of suits and sharp voices, that places like that had already decided his worth. But Emma held his hand and asked him quietly if he would sit with her just like he did on the bench, and that was enough to make him say yes. The meeting room filled quickly, chairs scraping, voices low but tense. The HOA board sat at the front behind a long table, faces tight, papers stacked neatly like shields. The same board member from the park avoided looking at Mr. Hale at first, because guilt is loud even when no one speaks. Emma sat beside her mother in the front row, her feet not touching the floor, swinging slightly, while Mr. Hale sat one seat away, shoulders hunched, feeling every eye in the room on him, not with anger this time, but with expectation, and expectation is heavier than blame. The meeting started the usual way, formal words, calm voices, reminding everyone of order and process, but the room did not stay calm for long. A neighbor stood up and spoke about the video, about how it made them ashamed and angry. Another stood and said they remembered Mr. Hale helping their family when no one else would. Voices overlapped, emotions rose, and the board struggled to regain control, calling for order again and again. But order could not erase truth once it had been spoken out loud. When Mr. Hale's name was finally mentioned directly, the room went quiet. The board asked him to speak if he wished, and his heart raced so hard he thought it might stop him. He stood slowly, hands shaking, and for a moment he could not find words, because years of being told to stay quiet do not disappear easily. Then he looked at Emma, who nodded at him with complete trust, and something inside him steadied. He spoke simply, because simple truth is the strongest kind. He told them he never wanted trouble, that he only wanted a place to sit, that he once believed this neighborhood was home, and that losing it felt like losing his name. His voice cracked when he spoke about his wife, about how she loved this community, how she believed neighbors looked out for each other, and the room felt that pain, deep and shared. The board member from the park finally stood too, his voice different now, quieter, less certain. He admitted that rules had been enforced without understanding, that complaints were processed without faces attached, that somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing people and only saw violations. His words shocked the room, because apologies are rare in places built on authority, and hearing one felt like the ground shifting. Not everyone agreed. Some board members argued back, saying rules kept property values high, saying kindness could not replace structure, but their voices sounded thinner now, because the room had changed. Emma suddenly stood up on her chair, small but fearless again, and asked if rules were supposed to make people safer or lonelier, and laughter mixed with tears filled the room, because the question was simple and impossible to ignore. The chairperson asked her to sit, gently this time, and promised her question would be answered, but everyone already knew the answer, even if they were afraid to say it. After hours of tension, debate and raw emotion, a vote was called, not final, but powerful. Enforcement against Mr. Hale would be paused immediately, all past fines reviewed, and temporary housing support discussed. The words felt unreal as they were spoken. Mr. Hale sat back down slowly, tears sliding again, because relief does not arrive quietly, it crashes through you. Emma squeezed his hand so hard it hurt, smiling like she had just won something bigger than a prize. As the meeting ended, people gathered around Mr. Hale, offering help, rides, meals, stories, and he felt overwhelmed, because accepting kindness takes courage too. The board member from the park approached him last, eyes tired, and said softly that he was sorry, not as an official, but as a person, and Mr. Hale nodded, because forgiveness does not erase pain, but it opens space to breathe. Walking out into the evening air, the neighborhood felt different, not perfect, not fixed, but awake, and as Emma skipped ahead, talking about bringing bird seeds tomorrow, Mr. Hale realized that whatever happened next, even if the HOA pushed back, even if the rules fought to stay the same, something had already changed forever. Because once a community hears its own silence break, it can never pretend it did not know. And for the first time in years, Mr. Hale walked forward not as a problem to be managed, but as a man whose story mattered, and that was a kind of victory no rulebook could take away. The morning the decision became official, the park felt different before anyone even spoke about it. The air was warmer, not because the weather had changed, but because fear was no longer sitting on every bench. The HOA released a statement that tried to sound careful and professional, but the meaning was clear to everyone who read it. All fines against Mr. Hale were forgiven. Enforcement related to the park was rewritten, and a new community care program would begin immediately. The words spread through the neighborhood faster than any warning notice ever had, and Mr. Hale read them twice, then a third time, because believing good news after years of bad takes time. Emma ran ahead of everyone that morning, pulling Mr. Hale toward the park like she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. Neighbors followed, some carrying coffee, some carrying flowers, some just carrying quiet smiles. The bench waited in the same place, but it no longer felt like a place of exile. It felt like a meeting point. Mr. Hale sat down slowly, his hands steady for the first time in a long while, and Emma climbed up beside him, swinging her legs proudly, telling him this was their bench now, and he laughed, a real laugh, one that surprised even him. The HOA board member who once watched from a distance arrived without a phone in his hand, dressed simply, and stood awkwardly near the path. He cleared his throat and spoke to the small crowd, not with authority, but with humility. He admitted mistakes openly, saying the system forgot the people it was meant to serve, saying this moment had forced them to look at themselves honestly. Some nodded, some remained cautious, because trust returns slowly. But the words mattered, because they were said out loud where everyone could hear them. Emma's mother stood nearby, watching Mr. Hale talk with neighbors who once avoided him, listening as stories flowed freely now, laughter mixed with tears, memories returned to the park like birds coming back after a long winter. Someone brought a small sign and placed it near the bench, simple and unpolished. It read, "Community Bench," and no one objected, because everyone understood what it meant. Mr. Hale was offered a small apartment nearby, temporary at first, with real support behind it, not paperwork promises, and when he held the keys in his shaking hand, he closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of something solid and hopeful, something that meant he would not have to disappear again. Emma hugged him tightly, telling him she could visit anytime, telling him he had to keep his promise, and he promised again, louder this time, because he was no longer afraid of the future. As days passed, the park changed in small ways. Neighbors sat longer, talked more, waved instead of watching silently. Rules still existed, but they were no longer sharp weapons, they were guides, and when someone struggled, people noticed, because they had learned what happens when you look away. Mr. Hale took on a simple role caring for the park, not as punishment, but as pride, watering plants, fixing loose boards, feeding birds, doing the things he always loved, and every time he did, he felt like a piece of himself was returning. One afternoon, as the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the grass, Emma asked Mr. Hale if he remembered her request, the one that started everything, and he nodded, smiling softly, telling her he remembered every word. She said she only wanted him to stay, to not disappear, and to know he mattered, and he told her she had done more than that. She had reminded a whole neighborhood how to be human. As the cameras blinked quietly in the background, no longer threatening, no longer feared, Mr. Hale sat on the bench, watching children play, listening to voices fill the park, feeling something he thought was gone forever, belonging, and he realized that the smallest voices often carry the biggest truths, and that sometimes, all it takes to change everything is a child brave enough to ask a simple question, and a community willing, at last, to listen.